World a home and furnish it with love. Grow apple trees and honeybees and snow white turtle doves. I like to teach the world to sing with me. Perfect harmony, perfect harmony. I like to ride the world round and keep it company.
Carb diet may be increasing their chances of developing heart disease.
A little sweet now and then, but too much sugar can be bad for your health.
Health study really got our attention today. It's in a medical journal called Circulation, and it says that men who drink soda or other sugary beverages greatly increase their risk of heart attack.
As every scary Netflix nutrition documentary starts, a black screen. Dun, dun, dun. But not today. Today is an informative session about my research question. How are excessive amount of sugar and cardiovascular disease related? You may be asking what cardiovascular disease may be. It is a disease that is related to the heart that has multiple conditions. One of the diseases is atherosclerosis, a condition that develops when plaque builds up in the arteries. A heart attack, where blood flow is blocked, a stroke, where blood supply is cut off from the brain, or heart failure, where the heart isn't pumping well enough. Now let's move on over to the sweet side of things. So what makes up sugar? All it is carbon and water. Yup, I know, surprising. So, coming in, here's the roster for the carbohydrates. At guard, we have glucose, which is the most abundant and gives food the mild sweet flavor. Then we got the shooting guard, fructose. Tastes the sweetest of all the sugars and is found in your fruits, in all the fruits that you eat. Then we got galactose, another monosaccharide. It's a primary sugar in milk and dairy products converted to glucose. And here comes the home run. You ready? We got sucrose, which is both glucose and fructose together, creating it a disaccharide, which is two monosaccharides linked together, which is created by removing an H from one of the sugar molecules to form water. Sucrose is a table sugar. It's what sugar that you consume, which is extremely interesting. And then you also have oligosaccharides, which is 3 to 10 sugar molecules, and then you have polysaccharides, which are 10-chain molecules, 10-chain or more molecules that are created of monosaccharides. Ding, 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 ding. Is that time for case studies? I think it is. In this epidemiological study, it shows the direct relationship between cardiovascular disease mortality and the increase of added sugar consumption and calories. As you can see on the study, when the percentage of calories and added sugar consumption went up, so did the mortality rates for cardiovascular disease patients. But when it went down to 14%, so did the cardiovascular disease mortality. All right, case study 1, done. Now we move on to the meat and potatoes of the video, digestion. So first, with carbohydrates, we start in the mouth. Salivary amylase begins the digestion of carbohydrates. It then goes to the stomach. The acidity of the stomach actually halts salivary amylase and stops carbohydrate digestion from furthering until it gets to the small intestine. In the small intestine, in the duodenum, the start of the small intestine, pancreatic amylase continues digestion and is secreted through the pancreatic duct. Then, in the small intestine, the brush border enzymes digest disaccharides and oligosaccharides and polysaccharides and are broken down by maltase, sucrase, and lactase to create monosaccharides again. So these enzymes break them down to monosaccharides, and the way that glucose and fructose gets to the bloodstream is through facilitated transfusion. and this is through the GLUT2 and for glucose and GLUT5 for fructose. Now, when it gets to the blood, where does it go? So, when the monosaccharides enter the bloodstream, they travel to the liver via the portal vein. The liver can convert fructose and galactose to glucose. The liver may form glucose to glycogen for burnout energy or release to bloodstream for use in another part of the body. All right, so this is what I've been getting excited for, to really get into the cardiovascular disease part of it. Here we go. So basically, when blood glucose level rises, the hormone insulin is released from the beta cells of the pancreas. Insulin stimulates cells to take up glucose from the blood. Insulin also stimulates the liver and muscle cells to store glycogen. But then, this happens in a lot of type 1 and type 2 diabetic patients, is that insulin resistance becomes a thing, where the liver and the muscles aren't listening to the hormone insulin at all to store glycogen or create glucose products. And so basically it suppresses glucose production, but insulin is still high, and it promotes the fat production in the liver, which, as we know, this increase is known as lipogenesis. So this lipogenesis creates more triglycerides in the liver. And as it leaves the liver out into the bloodstream, it leaves as VLDL, very low density lipoprotein. And as the fats on the VLDL start to decrease because they're getting taken off, it is then the LDL, the low density lipoproteins, that then start to cause problems. Because when the LDL is bad cholesterol, very bad cholesterol. While in the bloodstream, macrophages digest LDL, and after the digestion of the LDL, foam cells build up in the blood vessels, called something that we're reverting back to, atherosclerosis. And as we know, atherosclerosis is a condition that develops when plaque builds up in the blood vessels.
Yes, it is indeed the case study Bell. So for this study, it was called Fructose Consumption, Potential Mechanisms for Its Effects to Increase Visceral Adiposity and Induce Dyslipidemia and Insulin Resistance, done by Kimber L. Stanhope. What they really got throughout this whole entire study was that the higher fructose diets may provide a lipid oversupply, which overall increases VLDL, and as we just went over, that turns to LDL, and then is consumed by the macrophage, then creates the foam cell, which is not good for cardiovascular disease at all. Another way that high glucose levels can lead to cardiovascular disease is when there's a high amount of glucose in the blood. It causes damages in the cell's lining, in the endothelial cell's lining, and this impairs the ability for the arteries to exactly widen. So they make the arteries stiffer, and they're more prone for hypertension. This also leads to a damaged endothelium and becomes adhesive to immune cells, and has a early startup for the plaque formation and what is about to come. I know, so sad, the last clinical trial, Bell, or last case study, Bell, but this study is a clinical trial done by Zheng S. They did a study named Aged Monkeys Fed a High-Fat, High-Sugar Diet, Recapitulate Metabolic Disorder and Cardiac Contractile Dysfunction. This study, as showed in the text, is done with aging older monkeys that some had high-sugar, high-fat diets, and others just had a regular diet. And as you can see in the graph, it shows that the triglyceride levels and the glucose levels are both up for these monkeys, or are for the high-fat, high-sugar diets, which I was trying to really encapsulate here, that the amount of fat and the amount of sugar really play an effect on the cardiovascular disease, and it all comes from the sugar that we're consuming. And then if you see here as well, it's a little graph of showing what has increased and what has decreased in the monkey system. And as well here, it's a good picture of the aortic tissue. And what I'm trying to drive home here is to see the myocardial ATP is higher in the regular diet than that of the high-fat, high-sugar diet, making this important because that is the heart's primary energy source. Overall, my conclusion on this matter is a deep one, where I have taken this information for myself, and every time, of course, one sugary snack's not going to hurt me. Of course, one sugary whatever is going to be fine, but really has me looking for the future. And knowing what is going to happen, I can see the relationship between carbohydrates, between how it's not just about, there's more mechanisms to it. It going to the liver, having your insulin levels increase and not be able to function anymore. It's a scary process. It's a scary thought, but I'm so glad that I was able to do research on this and figure out more about it, and as well as I'm hoping to get to everyone else and see how important sugar is, and sugar is connected with cardiovascular disease. And overall, yes, I do see a huge connection in it, and of course in moderation. Sometimes it's fine, but overall, to cut the sugar down is the best mechanism to continue with.